Welcome to the Business Learning Lounge. I'm delighted to be back here again. And today we have a fantastic visitor, Mel Samuels, who is the Deputy Director General of the Department of Communities here in WA. I'm delighted to have Mel here. She's relatively recently been appointed to the role and has really had a massively interesting career journey to get there. So I'm going to hand straight over to you, Mel. Welcome. So nice to have you here. Tell us a bit about your career journey, how you got to the position that you're in at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me as well. My journey is an interesting one. I did a social work degree, but I didn't actually start doing social work. I started a psychology degree and decided that probably a year in that I would change my degree. And I just instantly felt at home studying social work. And so it sort of put me back a bit of a year. And in my final year, my mum was diagnosed with cancer. And so it was quite a difficult sort of final year for my study and everything. And because of that, once I finished my degree, I was quite keen to, because I'm the oldest in our family of 4 children.
Oh, big responsibility.
Yeah, so I was keen to sort of, make my own way and start earning some money and not be a student. So a friend of mine that I went to uni with said, look, it was actually Family and Children's Services back then. They've got some jobs going and, do you want to do that? And I was just keen to start making some money.
Yeah.
So I started there and really not knowing that I was stepping into a child protection arena. I knew obviously intellectually, but I didn't really kind of get it until I got there.
A lot of people going in don't get it.
Yeah. And I remember coming home after, a day at work, having had quite a privileged, happy childhood and just not really realising that there are people in Western Australia who are really struggling. Yeah. And so I was a bit jaw-dropped for the first sort of few months. Anyway, I'll propel forward into very quickly. I think I took well to the work. And so I was tapped on the shoulder a lot through my career. I never, ever thought that I was good enough to get promoted. Yeah. But I did have people who were very kind to me.
Or saw something in you that maybe you didn't yet see in yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that I looked at the complexity of cases and the different challenges and, I did a social work degree, but I was spending half of my time in court and mixing with a lot of lawyers and those sorts of things. So you never really, I love social work because it's so diverse and all the things that you can do within this field of work. It's so intellectually challenging and so emotionally charged.
Yeah.
But I think that it was just one of those things that really kept me quite grounded as well about how privileged my life was and how much I wanted to give back to the community.
It is a labour of love.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
So I sort of actually I say to people now I kind of grew up in the system because I literally have done almost every child protection job from caseworker to senior caseworker to team leader, placement officer, assistant director, district director, executive director, like all of those roles. I think I probably hit a point, and I've got 4 children myself now, but I hit a point when my youngest was about 3 and I thought I really wanted to do something different. So I was actually asked to go out to the goldfields, and I worked in the goldfields for about 3 years as the assistant district director, and it was a hugely steep learning curve for me.
Yeah, very complex environment.
Yeah, and I had always thought that I had worked well with people from different cultures, but I realised how much I had to learn working with the Aboriginal community. And
it's a very volatile environment out in the goldfields. Yeah, always has been.
Yes, and I think just the vastness, the isolation. As a leader, I struggled with the isolation because I had worked up until that point mostly in the metropolitan area.
Yeah, very different in the cities, yeah.
So having people to talk to, and I think that's a really important part of leadership, particularly as women, you want to have people to talk to, and that was much more difficult to do when you're in a sort of remote location.
Yeah. And everything you say as a senior practitioner in that environment can be misconstrued, so you do have to be careful who you talk to as well.
Yeah. And then I, for family reasons, decided to come back to Perth after a period of time. My children were growing and they wanted to spend more time with their grandparents. But then I'll fast forward to sort of 2 years ago where this Deputy Director General position came up. Prior to that, I had been in executive director roles and I was becoming quite burnt out, and I had not, people had always said to me, child protection, you can only do it for 2 years, you'll burn out and you can't stay. That wasn't my experience. I always felt motivated. I never felt burnt out. But about probably during the time of the pandemic, I felt probably the closest to burnout that I had felt for a multitude of reasons. But I recognised within myself that I needed to sort of step back. And at the time, I didn't appreciate how much that impacted other people in a positive way, because they said not many leaders sort of... People
are not brave enough to step backwards. Yeah.
And I think probably people, I'm guilty of it you see people in a trajectory and you think, wow, they're kind of going upwards.
Yeah.
But for me, it's never been about that. I'm the most reluctant leader in some ways. As I said, always kind of being sort of tapped on the shoulder. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about applying to that?
Someone else kind of almost pushing you.
Yeah,
into leadership roles. Yeah.
Yes. And so the decision to sort of step back from that was really about my health and about my family. Yeah. And I needed...
What age were your kids at that point?
So my eldest was about to sort of start, going into ATAR years. So 10, 11 and 12 and...
High risk time for them.
Yeah, and I really wanted to be around for them. And I just knew as well, I felt it within myself that I had lost a little bit of my spark around the work. So I wanted to go back. What has always excited me and driven me has been the direct practice with families and children. So I went to a district director role, which I loved, and it really...
much closer to the actual practice stuff. Yeah.
And, I mean, it's also a challenging job. It's not an easy job, but I felt like it was where I could make the most difference. And so having been sort of in those sort of front-facing roles, it was really wonderful for me to kind of heal from a lot of the bureaucratic stuff that goes on in sort of big organisations. And then when this Deputy Director General job came up, my husband was actually quite ill at the time, so I didn't even know it was happening. And I just kept getting all of these messages from people saying, you need to apply for this job. I hope you're applying. And it kind of was like 2 positions away from where I was.
It's a pretty big step from DD or district director upwards. Yeah.
And so I just didn't actually, I thought it was a bit ludicrous, really. I was just thinking that this is just madness. And so I sought some advice from people that I trust, and they all said, you have to just give it a go.
Yeah.
And in my head, I kind of thought, well, it's good to put my hat in the ring, and maybe in 5 years it might be an option, and at least I would let people know that I was prepared.
Hey, I'm interested in progressing, but maybe not right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even when the job advertisement came out, I was completely intimidated by the job ad. But I went through the process, and I remember coming out of the interview and thinking I had done my very best, and I was very proud just of myself.
Of what you'd done. Yeah.
Of what I had prepared. I felt like I gave a good interview, and I was really pleased. And if that's where it ended, I was really happy with that. Then I got the job. So,
and when you got it, was there a bit of like, oh, am I going to be able to do this?
Completely.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end, there was the initial shock when I got the phone call, and then kind of this, real excitement.
Yeah.
And then immediately a sense of terror.
Yeah.
Can I
actually do this? Am I capable of doing this?
Yes.
Yeah. And you know, that's been the theme of what you've said in terms of your journey, is kind of almost an accidental leader to a certain extent, an accidental climbs up. When you look at yourself in the mirror, what do you see in terms of your leadership? What do you think you see versus other people who keep tapping you on the shoulder? How is that different?
I think I'm so really invested in the work. I would say I'm a very hard worker. I have a very strong work ethic. So I'm quite focused on what I'm doing in the job that I'm doing. And so I'm very rarely kind of going, oh gosh, you know, what's the next thing? Because I'm so focused on what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I think that passion for really serving the community is at the heart of it all.
Yeah.
Which is not a false humility. It's a genuine piece of who I am.
Yeah.
As a leader, and I refer to myself as a practitioner, because I think when I first started doing this work, my eyes were quite opened. As I said, I was in these jaw-dropping moments all the time. I never really understood why people didn't celebrate child protection workers more, because they do quite heroic things, and it's not at all glamorous. It's sheer hard work. And
actually it's always the things that go wrong that hit the press. And so they get slammed for all the things that go wrong.
Yes.
Even though, you know, things go wrong in a normal family. But if something goes wrong with a child in care, we seem to put such heightened expectations on workers within the industry. And yet they do hard work every day.
Yeah, and I genuinely believe that they save lives every day.
Absolutely.
You know,
they save young people's lives every single day.
Yeah. One person described it to me as like firemen. You know, most people run out of burning buildings. Firemen run in. Child protection workers are very similar. They run into these situations that everybody's kind of running away from.
Or going, that's too hard.
Yes. Or that's a private family matter. I don't think that I should intervene.
Yeah.
But child protection workers do step into that space. And
it's daily.
Yeah. And it's all consuming, and it's relenting. And, you know, child protection workers understand how rewarding it is when you get to see a kid who can't speak, who might be 5 or 6, actually speak for the first time and start to communicate. You know, kids who their heads are riddled with lice, and then, you know, they finally get looked after and cared for, and they've got this beautiful mop of hair, and they're happier, and, you know, all of those things that are so critical in the first, you know, 1,000 days of life, I think are so important.
But the other end of it is they do have to go in and take kids away from families, which, you know, as you know, I spend a fair amount of time in your industry, and my heart breaks for them, because that's hard work.
Yeah.
That's something you'd never want to do. In the reality, you know, when you're studying social work, I'm sure you don't ever think about walking in and taking a child away.
No.
And yet that's the work they have to do. It's not easy.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy, and I've done it many times. And it's about bringing our greatest humanity and compassion into those moments, because they're really hard. And I think that there's not enough focus on the impact that it has on the worker when they have to do those things. But, you know, that's why leadership is so important, to wrap around those staff who are doing those very, very challenging things, and often still have to work with the family, even though they've had to undertake this incredibly, serious act of removing a child. Yeah.
And I guess, that I think externally there's a lot of misunderstanding of the work, because it's only ever, as I say, the negative stuff that hits the press. Unfortunately, the press don't tend to validate or every time that a child gets saved. But it's hard work. And what we're seeing at the moment in your industry is a lot of people falling over.
Yeah.
As you said, you got to that edge. That humility that you showed in stepping backwards probably saved your life. Yeah.
Oh, without question. Without question.
But not everyone can necessarily do that, either financially or from a ego perspective, I guess.
Yeah.
And so we are seeing a lot of people falling over in the industry, which is a risk.
Yeah, it is. And I think the whole issue of psychological safety and needing to provide that, containing people, supporting people, giving people opportunities to debrief.
Yeah. That leadership that kind of just sits underneath. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember saying to my staff, we talk about servant leadership, and I know it sort of people resonate with that, others don't resonate with that style of leadership. But I really try to say to people, even in this role, I only exist to support what you do. And because I understand it, because I've done it, I know I have a fairly strong sense of what's needed. But it's also about raising the profile of these workers who
incredible work they do.
Yeah, who go above and beyond.
Yeah, every day. I was with one group just recently, and they'd been chasing around at 2 a.m. all on a Saturday night looking for a child that had gone missing. There's not many jobs in this world that would have you chasing around the streets looking for a child that isn't your child just because you care.
Yeah, that's right.
That's incredible. But those aren't the stories that come out. It's always unfortunately, when things go wrong, and they do go wrong.
Yeah.
As part of the industry that you work in, as any industry, it's just that it's young people that are hurt when it goes wrong. So, yeah. So give me a bit of we're sitting here on International Women's Day, reflecting on your journey, which has been an incredible journey of kind of almost being pushed into leadership. But give me a sense of you as a woman, how you've ebbed and flowed through your career and the challenges that you might have faced in that space.
Yeah. So I think, my mum passed away when I was quite young, and she was an amazing woman. I was very fortunate to have an incredible mother. And so I always aspired to be like her, really. And then there's a sort of sadness that I can't have these conversations with her. But I think for me as a reluctant, accidental leader, if you like, I've really tried hard, very intentionally, to balance motherhood with my leadership role, because I didn't actually envisage I would have a career. I did my social work degree thinking that it was something that I was good at. I never expected to kind of, progress to this level.
Yeah, climb to the level that you have. Yeah.
Yeah. But what it's meant for, I have 2 sons and 2 daughters, and equally they will say how important it is, for them to see, my strength, my motivation. It's a lot of juggling. It's, I'm lucky to have a very supportive husband, but I have to manage work life and home life in a very intentional way.
Yeah.
I probably am, I kind of don't really like the term workaholic, but I probably am a bit of a workaholic.
Yeah.
But as I said, it's because I really enjoy what I'm doing.
And you're passionate about it.
Yeah. But I have to, at the same time, don't want to miss out on or regret not spending enough time with my family. And I don't think that I do that a lot, because when I'm at home, I really try to be very present at home.
Switch off from work.
Which is harder to do in these sort of senior roles, because there is an expectation that you're going to be available all the time.
Especially if something goes wrong.
Yeah. But I try to, really communicate more with my family about what's happening for me, and equally get them to communicate with me about what's happening for them, so that we can function as a strong family, because that's really important to me as well.
Yeah, that vulnerability at home is as important as it is in a leadership role.
Yeah, and I feel like that's an important piece. I work with men and women who their family is really important to them, and as a leader, I feel like it's very important for me to support them in their parenting roles as well, because the work can be consuming. So how can I carve out some space for them to do the things that they want to do, if it's take their child to a doctor's appointment, or, coach their son's, team, whatever it might be, or whatever's important for them, whether it's fitness or various hobbies. I want to be able to support them, because or
even going to a Christmas play with your kids or whatever. Yeah, the little stuff as much as the big stuff. Yeah. Because
often they're working very long hours anyway. Yeah. So it's recognising the whole person. And I try to communicate that too in my relationship with my boss as well, because it's important for me. I'm at my best when
you've got that.
When I've got that balance. Yeah.
And we know, the research tells us that without that balance, when you go out of whack, your leadership capability actually drops, because then you're not getting what you need back and you're not topping yourself up.
Yeah.
So talk to me about some of the challenges you've had over the years. What would you say has been either or a couple of big challenges you've had as a female leader? I know your industry is female dominated, but at the senior levels, there's still a fair percentage of men still in senior roles. As a female leader, what challenges have you faced?
Quite a few, I think, just in terms of time. I do a whole day's work before I get to work. With family and knowing where everybody is.
It's different, it is for female leaders,
but I've learnt to be a bit more vocal about, there are times when an 8 o'clock meeting is needed, and there are times when an 8 o'clock meeting isn't needed. Yeah. And so, just being vocal about, hey, I've got these commitments. I do have to do the occasional school pick up or drop off. And so learning to be a bit more assertive and not so much of a victim in those sort of situations. I've had to be more vocal about it. And
intentional about, hey, no, I'm not going to book an 8 o'clock meeting if I don't.
Yeah. And I think just, as a woman as well, particularly I'm a woman of colour, and so sometimes there's unspoken sort of stereotypes or things that people maybe expect or don't expect, which I've had to navigate, which, sometimes that's quite challenging in terms of managing people's expectations, or it's a bit of a surprise sometimes when they realise that you're the
senior person.
Yeah.
I think all of us that have been through organisations over the years have had those moments where we go, actually, no, I'm the one in charge. In the most polite way possible. It's challenging though.
And it's challenging for me personally, because I'm actually not someone who's wanted these roles. And, your balance kind of, I even find from other women sometimes who are like, well, are you spending enough time with your children? I hope you're spending enough time with your children. And I'm kind of like, what's that about?
It's a big societal pressure.
Yeah.
I remember when my son was still in school, I was still one of the only full-time working moms, and I used to get looks. They wouldn't ever say anything to my face, but there were definitely looks around, oh, how can you be a full-time working mom?
Yeah.
How do those go together? We still do live, there's still quite a societal pressure on us as women to be the perfect mom and be the perfect employee as well.
Yes. And I definitely have felt that pressure through my career journey, both from men and women, managing people's, well, it's not managing their expectations, but being hit with people's expectations about what I should and shouldn't do.
Yeah.
That's been quite hard, but I've been I think the key to managing that for me has been having really good people around me that I trust, that I can talk to about these challenges and laugh with. I think humour is really important in navigating some of these sort of funny things that happen.
Yeah, well, I was interviewing just recently a lady who's climbed the ladder in the mining sector, and we were chatting about the fact that, our generations just almost accepted that you were going to be sexually harassed or treated as if you weren't the most senior person, even if you were. There was almost an acceptance. What do you think because it has changed over the years, what do you think's been the shift that you've noticed in your industry? When did that start to shift from, you were assumed to be the junior and now we've got a lot more senior women in play?
Yeah, I think it's hard to pick when that happened, but I think that as more women are supported by other women, I think that that's been a real key in terms of seeing some of that shift. So I work really hard to support women who are working with me because all too often I think it can be too easy to kind of just follow the norm and what's expected. But to say to someone maybe who works part-time because they're caring for their children, to say, actually, I think you can do this job and we can make it work. You could
do a senior role and still be part-time. Yeah.
Or you can do a senior role and work outside of the metropolitan area.
Yeah.
I think that just being more creative and innovative about how we provide opportunities for women, I think is really important.
Because not everyone wants to work full-time.
No.
But there is a reality is that some of the jobs are fairly all-consuming in your industry, which is a hard challenge, especially your directors in regions. Those are pretty all-consuming roles. And helping people to find their own balance in those roles is important.
Definitely, yeah. I think there will always be those roles that are full-time, forward-facing roles, but equally there are some other positions that are so important that don't need to be full-time. Yeah. And there's some incredibly talented people who can really help leaders who, I had quite a few people in various roles that I have had who I've relied on who have not been the most senior people, and they have given me intel and sort of shared networks with me that have been so valuable because they've had a little bit more time to think and to, they have a vision for the overall goal. And so they share that with you if they know that you value them, if they know that you are looking at what they're doing and you care about what they're doing.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to
care about them.
And care about them, yes.
Yeah, which is a fundamental, that servant leadership. It's about actually caring for your people so they care for your clients and the people you look after. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really from your perspective, it's been around actually just valuing the people around you, which is, it sounds simple, but it's not actually everyday practice for a lot of leaders. In terms of if you were to look at a younger woman coming up through your industry who's maybe striving to have a career in your industry, what advice and guidance would you give to a younger woman coming through, or a younger man? Could be, because your industry probably doesn't have enough men coming through. What would you give to someone younger?
I would say be really to think about, I mean, if I went back and spoke to myself, while it's been nice to have been pushed forward and tapped on the shoulder, I had a responsibility to think a little bit more about my career and what my choices were about.
Yeah.
And
be more intentional.
Yeah, be more intentional. And I feel like that's something that I try to share with younger people coming through now, is sort of say, what do you want and why do you want that? And tell me what's important about that for you. Because if you can hit their purpose, if you can understand what their why is, then there's lots of opportunities. Because not everybody does want to work full time, and not everybody wants a senior position.
Yeah. Not everyone wants to be a deputy DG.
No.
Yeah.
And that is perfectly okay, because there are people who do incredibly important roles that are not senior roles.
Yeah.
And they do their job with such skill and compassion. So I think for people coming through, whether they want whatever their career goals are, it's to really have taken the time to think about that.
Yeah.
But to also
be intentional about your career direction and really thinking about what do you want. Yeah.
Yeah. And to do a little bit of cost benefit analysis too. Like, you know, how important is your health? How important is your family? How important is your social life and your relationships? And try and think about what have you got room and time for? Yeah. Because that will ultimately make you happy and will help you get to where you want to be. So
that balance around work and home and play rather than just work focused. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think what I've become more aware of in the last couple of years is part of psychological safety is also being culturally aware of people as well. How can they bring their whole selves to work? If they're from the Middle East, or if they're from Africa, or if they're from Asia, or if they're Aboriginal, wherever they're from, how do they have a level of, I can bring all of myself to work, and that's accepted and that's celebrated and valued in my workplace.
Yeah.
Not that I have to hide that part of who I am. Yeah. And if we can kind of strike that balance of accepting people where they're at, valuing what they've got to offer, you get a really rich, dynamic workforce.
Yeah. So almost encouraging young people to find who they are and bring that wholeness of them to what they're doing. Because, you know, we know from the research on resilience that the key part of maintaining resilience is being able to be yourself.
Yes.
Because if you're constantly faking it and trying to put on a persona, that's hard work. So we really want people to be whole in the workplace, to bring their best. So yeah, great advice to give younger people. So really to think about their careers and to guide their careers, but also to look at what makes them whole and what allows them to bring their whole of self into the workplace.
Yes.
Yeah. So great advice for younger people. In terms of your industry, what do you see as the biggest challenges moving forward? Because you are in a very changing mode because you are shifting things as an industry. What do you see as the biggest challenges or most exciting opportunities? I guess you could look at both ends.
Yeah, I think what's challenging is that we have very real issues in society that will not be a single agency response for resolution. It needs sort of the whole of society, government and non-government, working together to address some of the challenges we've got in society.
The mental health, the domestic violence, the drugs, all of those are the aspects, the housing challenges.
Yeah, all of that.
Yeah.
And there's so many things that are interrelated.
Yeah.
Children with disabilities, parents with disabilities, how we provide services to people who need it when they need it.
Yeah.
Not everyone needs a service all the time. They just need it at critical moments. And So addressing all of that will need everybody kind of leaning into those social issues.
Yeah.
But I think the challenges for us is around the kind of 24/7 environment that there's my sense is that there's a growing expectation around that, and that's quite challenging. Because I don't know that we were ever set up that way. Obviously we have crisis care and that sort of response for crises, but we all know that crises don't necessarily happen between, 9 to 5 on Monday and Friday. So I think that there's some...
I think they seem to start on Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock. I never book anything with your organisation on a Friday because it's always a drama.
Yeah, absolutely.
Friday afternoon, 5 o'clock through the weekend.
Yes. So I think there's some emerging challenges. I think in Western Australia we're seeing more fires and cyclones and, floods and, those sorts of things, which also puts pressure on a lot of people don't know that we kind of deal with that emergency management as well. So making that more visible for people. And I think the exciting things are that we have got very skilled and talented people. And so it's about, I came into this
passionate as well.
Yeah.
People if I ever see a passionate group of people, it's normally in communities, passionate about what they do.
And they really care about it.
Yeah.
There's so many people and, I might be going home at 5:30 or 6 o'clock and there's still people there. And, in district offices, there'll be people there till quite late. And it's not to say, they're working late. They're dealing with something that's quite personal for a child. Yeah. And they're having to make decisions and they're really hanging in there until we can get a resolution. Yeah. And often people don't necessarily know that. So
just working late for the sake of it.
No, it's not about getting overtime or anything. It's actually about they're trying to make the best decision that they can in quite difficult circumstances.
And often it's Hobson's choice. It's not even, one of the things I always think is that they're often going, which is the least bad choice?
Yes.
Not what's the best choice. And that's hard.
Yeah. The number of choices gets quite limited.
Yeah.
So it's incredibly rewarding though. And often I think people won't necessarily know that until many years later, when you see these young people who go on to have amazing lives and careers and, who've come out of the care system. Yeah. Clearly there's lots of tragic things that happen as well, but there are a lot of good things that happen. And, it's other people in, it's the caseworkers, it's their team leaders, it's the education officers and the psychs and everyone that's, wrapping around that child or that family to bring about that good outcome. Yeah. And I think that that's to be celebrated, even if it's not well known. So
I always think that the good stuff that happens is very seldom celebrated, especially externally. Because as with you, there are a lot of people who just do the job because they're passionate about it. Mm-hmm. They're not saying, I'm doing an incredible job. And then when the negative press hits, it just undermines them. And hard work. But a fascinating industry. And I love the fact that you step back into a role to actually get your passion back, because I think that would have aided you in the last couple of years as you've stepped into this bigger role, because having your passion back means you can give that to the job that you're in. What's your look forward?
Oh gosh, that's a hard question. To be honest, it's hard to look forward, but look, I think at the end of the day, I want to keep doing this work, as long as I am making a difference and making the system better. If I stop doing that, then I probably need to think about doing something different. But at the moment, I hope that I'm helping create some change within the system, and if nothing else, trying to get behind our staff, our workforce, particularly our leaders who have had a very challenging time over the last couple of years. It's hard to reimagine. Like, I think that this work needs a lot of commitment by a lot of people. It's never one single person who kind of makes it happen. It's a collective effort of a lot of people. And, you know, I want to keep doing that and being part of the solution that makes the system better, because at the end of the day, you know, children and families deserve that. Often children come into our system through no fault of their own.
Yeah.
And
they're victims of our society.
Yeah.
That you guys get to hold the space for.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, when you are in an organisation, or if you're in a part of a system where you only feel like you're putting a Band-Aid on, that can be really tough to keep up your resilience. And so, you know, what's important about these roles is actually making those big system changes.
Yeah.
So that it does make a difference for children, and, you know, for all of the people who interface with our system, whether it's, you know, tenants in housing properties, or, you know, parents who find out, you know, today that their child's got autism, or, you know, whatever it might be. It's about how do we actually make the system more collaborative and not so hard to navigate.
Yeah. So for you, looking forward is keeping on doing and keeping on using your passion to make a difference. And I guess what I hear when I'm working around your organisation is that people are looking to you in that role, because you are in a senior influence role. They're looking for you to bring that passion back into those senior roles, because that's been a void for a while. So super exciting for the industry and for your people that you still have your passion, and that you chose to step backwards to regain it. So
yeah,
really, really, you know, great thing to do. Leaders often don't do that and don't recognize, you know, that actually maybe it's time for them to step away so that they can step forward. So a great lesson for those around you and for those of listening to us. So thank you for your honesty and for your openness around your journey. And I look forward to seeing you continue to do a great job and to keep pushing those boundaries of change in your industry.
Thank you, Lynda.
Thanks, Mel.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us today.